to create our Maven practice repository, which we are going to use for the various hands-on steps. So I'll come back to my GitHub, and then I'll come back to my GitHub and I'll click here. You can equally click there. You can come to your repositories. Once you click on your repositories, you can click on new. I'll click on new, and then I'll call this repository practice. I'll call this repository practice Maven learning. So this means we'll be doing the practice with respect to the Maven hands-on. So you can use optional description. You can still put the same description, practice Maven learning, as the description to this repository. Now, because our first repository or our main repository had a README file, I'm going to add a README file so that we don't have issues cloning or pushing to this repository. So I'll click on create repository. Once I click on create repository, the repository will be created, practice Maven learning, and I'll have a new repository called practice Maven learning. So I'll duplicate this tab. You right click and you see the option to duplicate. So I'll be duplicating this tab. I'll duplicate this tab so that I can have this for my practice Maven, and then I can come to my main repository. Here you see the practice Maven repository. This is the repository link as well, and then this equally my practice Maven repository link. So I'll go to my download folder in my computer and then create a whole new folder for all the Maven hands-on. So you should also do this. So you can come to your download folder and we'll be creating a new folder in this download repository. This is my download folder because I'm using a MacBook. So all you need to do is to right click, you take a new folder, you can call it practice Maven learning. So you can call this practice Maven learning and you hit enter. So this will create a folder which we are going to be using for this project, practice Maven learning. Now what you do is you come to your VS Code. If you have Visual Studio Code, if you do not have Visual Studio Code, you can create a new, or you can download and install Visual Studio Code. Once you come to Visual Studio Code, I'll right click on my Visual Studio Code and I'll click on new window. So I'll right click on Visual Studio Code and click on new window. I'm doing this because I have many Visual Studio Code tabs open. That's why I don't want it to conflict. If you do not have any tab open, you can just open your VS Code directly. So once I open my VS Code, I'm going to maximize the tab so I can visualize everything clearly. Now, to open the newly created folder on VS Code, I'll click on File and I'll click on Open Folder. Once I click on Open Folder, you give me the possibility to select a particular folder that I want to open with my VS Code. So I'll come to Downloads because I created that folder with Downloads. I'll select this folder, Practice Maven Learning folder, and I'll open the folder. All you will see is just the folder has been opened, Practice Maven Learning folder. You can see from the tab here. Now what we are going to do is we are going to click on Terminal. You click on Terminal and then we select New Terminal, and we are going to, if you open your new terminal, you will see you're currently in the Practice Maven Learning folder. If you are a Windows user, you can click the drop down here and you can select Git Bash. I'm using the default terminal for MacBook, but if you're a Windows user, you click this drop down and you click on this drop down and you select Git Bash, just for ease of understanding. Now, once I have my Practice Maven Learning folder open, I'll come back to my GitHub repository. I'll clone both repositories. I'll begin by cloning the original repository which I have. I'll begin by cloning the original repository which I have. This repository is left in the course description. You can get this repository from the course description. Now, once I click on this, I'll be able to download this or clone. I'll be able to clone this repository in my local. I'll select this link, the repository link. They will tell you copy URL to clipboard. So I'll copy the URL to the clipboard. I'll come here. The first thing which I'll do is I'll do git clone and then I paste the repository link. I do git clone and I paste the repository link and I hit enter. Once you do git clone and you paste the repository link, you clone that repository, the main project repository which I have set up, the main project repository which I've set up for you. So if you come here to Maven, you see the project repository. You should be able to see the Java application code where you have our SRC and all the like. You should be able to see our pom.xml file, and then you should also be able to see our settings.xml. So let me minimize this here. That's the first thing. You clone the Practice Maven Learning repo. You click out of this Practice Maven Learning repo. You come back to GitHub. We are now going to clone the second repository. which is our practice Maven learning repo. I'll click on code and copy it to clipboard. Remember, the first one is the project code base that I've set up already. The second one, which you'll be cloning, is your own practice learning repo. It's your own practice learning repo. So what you do is you copy this, you come back to your VS Code. I'll clear my terminal. I'll type clear to clear my terminal, and then I'll do git clone and I paste the new repository link and I hit enter. I do git clone and I paste the new repository link and I'll hit enter. Now in my VS Code, I'll have two repositories. I'll have my practice Maven learning repository and the Maven learning repository. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my download folder. This is my download folder. If you're using Windows, you can come to this folder in your file explorer. I'll open this folder, and when I open this folder, you'll be able to see now two folders: the Maven learning folder, or the Maven learning repo, and then the practice Maven learning repo. So the first thing I'll do is I'll open the Maven learning repo. I'll right click on everything. I'll right click. I'll select copy, come back, open practice Maven learning repo, which had just a readme file. I'll delete this readme file. I'll move this readme file to trash, and then I'll paste 6 items. These are the items I've copied. It has a new readme file, a setting.xml file, a Maven learning file, and so on. So if I come back here, my Maven learning repo has this set of files, and then my practice Maven learning repo will have the same set of files. I'm doing this just because we want to save time. Ideally, these programming or these application files are created by the developers and submitted to the DevOps teams. Now, once you've done that, if you now come back to your GitHub, if you come back to your VS Code and you click on this practice Maven learning, you'll see most of the colors have changed because you've been able to put new content into the repository. When you put this new content into the repository, what do? We are supposed to push this learning content into our GitHub. Remember, if you come to GitHub here, we have in our practice Maven learning repo, we have just the README file, which is empty. Or well, we just have just the README file. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to push all these files in the practice Maven learning repo upstream. Now, if you do an ls, you'll see we have the Maven learning repo and the practice Maven learning repo. I'm going to cd into the practice Maven learning repo for us to be able to push the code to our GitHub. So I'll do cd practice. I can press tab and it will take practice Maven learning repo, and I hit enter. Once I do practice Maven learning repo, if I do an ls, I'll see the new files that have been created, the Java code, the Maven installation, and all the like. Once I have all of these, I'll do git add, and I put a dot. Let me clear my screen so everybody so you can easily see. So I'll do git add, and I do a dot. You'll tell me, you see all of these items will change from U to A. It's only the README file that has been modified. If you do git status, you will see the status of your files. You see these files have been added. These are new files. Java, application code, these are all new files, and the only modified file is the README file. Now, after doing git add, the next command which you do is to do a git commit. So you do git commit, you put a message, you say adding project source files, adding project source files, and then you hit enter. It's now going to create a commit of these new files. So if you do git status, you see nothing to commit. All of these files have been committed to the local repository. Now the last thing we have to do is to do a git push for us to be able to have these files pushed to our repository. So for us to do that, you just need to do a git push, and this should be able to push to my repository. Now I'm having these issues because my GitHub is not well set up, so I'll be using a personal access token to set up my own git push. So if you have your git push successful, that is okay. If you do not, you need to use a personal access token, and here is my personal access token. If you see the command here, so once you're able to push the files using your git push, you should be able to see all of these enumerating objects done, and so on. And this should be able to push the files to your newly created repo. If you come to GitHub and refresh the tab, you should be able to see all the newly created files in your practice Maven learning repo. Remember, these files are the same files that are in our Maven learning repo. So we just needed to copy them here since we are going to be making modifications on the files here. So that's the basic step which you need to first take before you can set up your project code base. Now we are going to be doing a manipulation. I can close the terminal now. We are going to be doing all the modifications in this practice Maven learning folder. Again, this is where our application code is found. This is our pom.xml file, which has all the configurations that we need, and then our settings.xml file, which has all the configurations that we need, and then our application itself is found in the src folder, which has the main containing the Java application and its resources, and in the test, which has the unit test cases. So let's go ahead in our next video to create an AWS EC2 instance that will be running our Maven commands in. Again, you need to have this GitHub repository and your code base in VS Code, and now we should be creating our EC2 instance to run all of our Maven commands.